What should the Cowboys expect from Micah Parsons in year two? And what are the expectations for Jabril Cox coming off an ACL injury? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On
Cowboys.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are talking linebackers today. Why does this position have me really nervous?
You know, I feel like there's been kind of a lot of uncertainty here, right? And a lot of up and down. I mean, you know, we've kind of been on the roller coaster with this position a lot. You know, you drafted Leighton Vander Esch. He had an incredible rookie season, and then seemingly kind of fell off a cliff for a couple of years. You draft Micah Parsons, who wasn't exactly the guy that Cowboy Nation wanted when he got picked. I mean, and
except for me, I was really excited.
Except for Marcus, who was really on board for the pick for the whole time. You know, and then he turned out to be amazing. So I think then later on in that same draft, you get a guy like Jabril Cox, who, you know, you had a high grade on and you were able to get much later. And then you get a similar situation this year, right, where you get Damone Clark, a guy that you think is deserving of a higher pick, dealt with the injury situation and fell. So I think the answer to your question is that it's been a roller coaster for this position for the Cowboys, of good and bad, and it's kind of hard to find your footing at this point and try to project it forward.
So we're going to be previewing the Cowboys linebackers going into the 2022 training camp and into the season. And let's start with Micah Parsons. We kind of glossed over him on Monday when we were doing our Edge Rusher show because he's still listed as a linebacker. So we could talk, Landon, about what he offers as a pass rusher and all that kind of stuff. But where do you expect him to improve at as a pure off-the-ball linebacker? And how do you think he performed in that role last year?
Yeah, you know, I think that because of how good he was as a pressure player, as a guy that was attacking the pocket, whether it's on the edge or as a blitzer, he was so good at that it kind of got overlooked at just how good he was playing at linebacker as well. I mean, he was definitely your best linebacker on the team, you know, beyond just, you know, kind of playing that role of moving around and being a chess piece for the Cowboys, right? So, you know, I think Pro Football Focus does a measurement on play action bite. It's basically a measurement of how much they move. And Parsons, I think, had one of the better numbers in the league, certainly the best number on the team, which is, you know, surprising for a guy who plays as aggressive as he does, you know, and he's still able to kind of take it in and not necessarily go too hard in on cues that are causing false steps. So I think he played incredible. I think especially, you know, the part of this game that really is just astounding to watch, if you go back and watch, you know, highlights or just any of these games, is how he played the screens. Like the screen game just is non-existent against the Cowboys when Micah Parsons is on the field. And that's because he basically can read all that very well. He's very aware of when it's happening. And then he has that ability to just absolutely teleport. And he gets in the backfield so quick and disrupts things so quickly that it becomes difficult. He's also was just way better as a coverage player than we expect. I mean, I think we all knew that he had the athleticism and the ability to do this. I don't think that was ever in question, but I think what was in question was the instincts and the actual ability to do it. Because, and you could point this out better than I can, I don't know that he did a ton of that at Pitt State. So
No.
I think that was something that was really surprising improvement there.
Yeah, and I remember watching a video that Brian Baldinger did last year from the NFL Network where he was showing there was a couple plays where Parsons would like take the wrong gap in the run game, but he was so athletic and played so hard that he was able to overcome it, right?
Nope.
And I'm just envisioning him like if he could make the right decision 5% of the time, more this year,
5%
right?
more of the time. Yeah.
I don't know if I said that correctly, but I think you guys get like if he
Hopefully more than 5%, but yes, 5%
like
more. Absolutely.
if he could be just a little bit more
Yeah.
disciplined and choose the right gap more often, you're going to see an even more disruptive player because he was able to make so many plays last year, despite not really necessarily knowing what to do or where to be. So that's the place that I'm really excited about because I had some questions about like his football instincts coming out of Penn State, which obviously proven wrong. Like he's just a football player, but like if he can become more disciplined and just have a little bit better idea of where plays are going to go, and he doesn't always have to rely on his athleticism. I mean, I was going to say he's going to be a superstar, but he already is. He's just going to reach that next level of being a all-pro player to a, hey, this guy is on the tier of Aaron Donald level defensive player.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the fun and exciting part about this conversation, right? Is that we're talking about a extremely young player who everything we've seen points to him being on that level of elite player. So the standard is high. But I agree. I think if he can just improve, the normal amount a rookie linebacker improves from year one to year two. I mean, we're going to see a player that is really one of the most dangerous players in all of NFL.
Well, and I was thinking about this the other day because there's been times this offseason where I'm looking at the depth chart on our lads, and you're like, okay, well, maybe they might be a little weak at defensive tackle, and their safeties maybe aren't quite as good as they need to be. But if Parsons can be as good as we think he can be, right, and he can kind of replicate what we saw last year, man, do you know how much that player can cover up stuff? Like I've
Yeah.
seen this over the last 20, 30 years of watching the NFL. If you have a truly elite, dominant player, they can completely change games and they can change your whole defense. Like, look at what JJ Watt did for Houston or what Aaron Donalds did
Yeah, the
for the
Rams.
Rams.
I was just going to point out the Rams themselves. They only have like 3 or 4 truly great players, and then kind of a decent middle class. But that's enough, right? If you could use those players well, that could really be enough to make your defense go.
Yeah, and I was even thinking like some other players that don't play the same position as Parsons. Like I saw what Darrelle Revis did for the
Yeah,
Jets in the
sure.
even the 2010s, right? Like when he was at his peak, their defense was impossible to play against because he was just such a dominant player. If Parsons can reach that level, we're not going to be worried about, hey, do they have a Pro Bowl 3 technique? Like it's just not going to be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, he gives you such, and all players like that, whether it's Revis or Donald or whomever, they give you such a schematic advantage because they can do so much more. They can be responsible for so much more than just a normal player at their position, even if it's just by reputation. Even if Revis is not doing anything on the right side of the field, but no one's throwing to his side just because it's Revis that's over there. That's and in Parsons' case, even if Parsons isn't sacking the quarterback, if they're dedicating 3 blockers to Parsons, that's going to open things up for everybody else. If they have to reroute their run game around where Parsons is lining up as a linebacker, that's going to have a positive effect for all the rest of the defensive players in the team. And that's what elite players do, is that they rise all ships because of this ability to kind of make things difficult schematically for offenses.
They end up being a force multiplier for your defense.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Micah Parsons is an all-pro player, but he can make the rest of the unit look better because he's on the field. And that's what you're hoping for, especially with this linebacker room. All right, let's continue to talk about these linebackers, but I want to tell you guys about our old friends at Rock Auto. Before we do that, with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock up on all the parts you need. But Rock Auto has everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, Landon, we've got several other linebackers to talk about, but the one that's probably going to play the most snaps here is Leighton Vander Esch. And we did touch on him yesterday's podcast a little bit, but We saw somebody who improved as the season went on last year. They did bring him back on a very team-friendly one-year deal. What are you expecting from Leighton Vander Esch this year?
I mean, I think we should kind of address that because I mean, I think the question yesterday was who could be a surprise starter who becomes an All Pro. So I do want to. I don't want to imply that I think that Leighton Vander Esch is going to become an All Pro. Surprise was definitely a key word there. But having said that, I do agree that I think Leighton played a lot better football down the stretch last year than he had in the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And I think that whether it's time away from the injury or time in the system or just feeling comfortable, whatever it is, if he can kind of pick up on that momentum from where he was. And you quoted the missed tackle numbers. I mean, he started out his season, and I don't have the exact numbers, but he started out the season under 10%. I think something he said 8.9% or something like that. Last 2 seasons, it kind of creeped up closer to 13 or 14% missed tackle rate. And then at the end of the year, it was kind of creeping back down underneath 10%. We need to kind of keep it under 10%. I mean, I think that's the thing that really makes Leighton Vander Esch a special player is his ability to play with range at that size and a large wingspan means he closes a lot of windows in the pass game very easily, and that he can get to players and wrap them up without them kind of getting anywhere in the run game. So I think if we see kind of that return to, when Leighton doesn't play well, it's because his game isn't clean. It's not because he physically is unable to do it or he's lost any ability. That hasn't been the issue these last few years. I mean, it may have been tied to injury, but I don't think that there's like a permanent loss of athleticism that he's struggling with. I think the issue has been, coming back from injury, cleaning back up his game, tightening back up his game. And I think as you saw last year, as he got more comfortable with what he's doing, he started becoming more second nature. Some of the other aspects of his game started to get cleaned up a little bit more, which obviously really raised his game overall.
Yeah, the one question I have about Vander Esch is like, what does his body look like this year? Because I don't know if you saw the pictures last year. Like, I'm not sure how much he was able to work out in the offseason and lift weights because of the surgery that he actually had
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the 2019 season. And it caused him to not be healthy in 2020, which we expected. Uh, but like, does he come back in just much better shape this year? Does he look I mean, like 2018 Vander Esch was 265 pounds and shredded,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he
Yeah.
was a freak. And that's why so many people loved him coming out of the draft. This is a 265-pound linebacker that can run a 4.65. That wasn't really the player that we saw over the last couple of years. So I'm just curious to see what he looks like because I do have some questions about him in coverage and some of his athleticism.
Yeah.
But if he
Sure.
gets that back, I mean, all of a sudden we're talking about somebody who legitimately could be a Pro Bowl player again.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, like most players, he has limitations for sure. I wouldn't necessarily want him covering tight ends on a regular
No,
basis, or
no,
you
no.
know what I'm saying. But I think in zone coverage and zone drops, because he's got such long arms, he's useful there. He's got the ability to drop into spots and create and close windows with his arms. I certainly agree. Like I think the mix. The problem with Leighton Vander Esch, besides the injuries, besides needing to clean up some stuff, is that he had a guy that was playing next to him for 2 years that was basically, had the same flaws as he did in Jalen Smith.
Yeah.
So that really didn't help either player. Is that they needed the ability to kind of mix and match these linebackers a little bit more. I think with Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons, and then you throw in some of the other guys we're about to talk about, and Cox, they're kind of have a nice mixture of body types a little bit more than they did previously. And I think that's going to help all these linebackers play a little bit more.
All right, let's talk about Jabril Cox because he's somebody that we both liked a lot coming out of college. Thought the Cowboys stole him in the 4th round. He only played 9 snaps on defense, but we saw it in preseason. And actually, in those 9 snaps, he had one play
Great
against
9
Daniel
snaps.
Jones. Well, he was really good. He
Yeah.
gets hurt on special teams, tears his ACL, misses most of the season. And now going into 2022, Cowboys are relying on him to be a big part of their defense. They lost 730 snaps at linebacker last year between Keanu Neal and Jalen Smith. I think they're expecting Jabril Cox to fill that role. Is that realistic?
We'll see. It sounds like from what we've heard that he's on a nice timeline for coming back and kind of being a participant in training camp. And if that's the case, I think that bodes well for him to kind of be in the mix and at linebacker. But he's still, a young player coming off an ACL injury. He didn't play a lot of football his rookie year. So I think that's, something to keep in mind. I will say that, he like Clark, like one of the other guys that's on this team, he played at LSU, at SEC level football. So it's not like the jumping competition is going to be enormous for him. And he did get his feet wet a little bit last year to get a little bit of the speed of the game. But I do think that if this was a situation where we were going into the year and Cox was the opposite linebacker of Parsons and we didn't have Leighton Vander Esch, I certainly would feel bad. I certainly would feel nervous about it. I think the thing that makes me feel more comfortable about this is that they've got Gifford, they've got guys that they have had experience playing on the field with them in defense. You don't want Gifford for the long term, but you've got Gifford and some other guys down the roster. You've got a lot of numbers to solve this problem. So if things don't go well at the third linebacker, you've got solutions.
Yeah.
But I do agree that counting on Cox for being a major part of this team is a little dicey, at least on our side of it, because we aren't seeing the medical reports every single day. So we don't know exactly how far along he is in his recovery.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the depth chart, Jabril Cox is like the third linebacker for the Cowboys, right? The problem is, there's a good and bad way to look at it. Good news is that he's really their fourth box player, right? Because Jaron Curse is going to play in the box 700 snaps. So that's good. The bad thing is that Micah Parsons isn't just a linebacker, right? He's going to take a lot of snaps on the edge, which kind of forces Jabril Cox up the depth chart. So if he needs the first month of the season to either be a backup or maybe he's just not ready, maybe he's just not active for the first 2 weeks, I think they can survive. But they're going to need him to be ready at some point during the season because he's going to need to play a lot of snaps because he is probably the only other linebacker on this team that's athletic enough to cover tight ends and make plays sideline to sideline other than Micah Parsons.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Really, that there, and maybe we didn't talk about it on the show, but so I'll bring it up. But the Cowboys have a dearth of these 6'1", 6 foot, 215 to 225 to 30 pound players, whether they be at safety, linebacker. They have bodies to fill this role. They're going to play a ton of nickel this year. Nickel is the new base. Two linebackers is more than likely going to be the base, defense. So, and as you mentioned, one of those two linebackers may be filled by the safety role. So they have, even if the depth chart may look a little bare, it's kind of like the defensive end depth chart. Not that the defensive end depth chart is bare in numbers, but as far as when you look at talent, you look at the defensive end chart and you're like, okay. But then you think about the fact, oh, yeah, well, we're adding Micah freaking Parsons on top of that list. And it's like, oh, goodness gracious, yes. And that's the thing, right, is that's the one thing about Parsons is that he's kind of this outside of depth chart player, right? So it's hard to look at either the linebacker or defensive end room and like include him in there in your mind and think that you're comfortable,
If we were considering him a pure edge, right, and all of a sudden it's DeMarcus Lawrence, Dante Fowler, Micah Parsons, Sam Williams, I think we would say that's one of the top 2 or 3 edge rushing rooms in the NFL. You've got stars and you've got depth. Most teams don't have that. If we were saying he's just a linebacker and we're not going to consider him an edge at all, I think you feel really, really good about your linebacker core. But because he plays both, we end up kind of taking it away from both of those and get a little bit more worried than what we should.
I think that's what it is, right? Instead of counting him for both, we subtract him for both. We don't give either room credit for Micah Parsons. So, and listen, but I do think you pointed something great out, is that it's not just Parsons that plays into the depth chart or the playing time of, let's call them second level players, because they're not all linebackers, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, like you mentioned, whether it's Jaron Curse, whether it's Donovan Wilson, whether it
could even be Jordan Lewis on some snaps as well, right?
Mukamu, Tyler Coyle, all these guys, like if they are eligible to get on the field somehow, are all kind of in that realm of being able to play that role a little bit. So I do think that it's if you're looking at the linebacker room just kind of in a very casual glance over, and it's easy to put Parsons in the defensive end room. Yeah, it's easy to look at this depth chart and go, wow, it's a lot of inexperience and not a lot of proven stuff. But when you look at how the Cowboys play, you look at how the Cowboys deploy their second level, you look at the players that they have that are getting kind of mixed in there, and it's some of the Cowboys' best players. It's J-Ron Kurtz, it's Micah Parsons. These guys are the guys that are going to take a ton of snaps here, and they're going to be fine. It's more about making sure that there's contingency plans when you need to move Parsons around, when you need to move Kurtz around. What's the linebacker core going to look like then?
All right. I want to tell you guys about betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball, which is going on right now, Wimbledon. We've got football coming up relatively soon. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. BetOnline also has MMA, boxing, all of your favorite sports and events. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, 4 more linebackers I want to run through really quickly, Landon, before we head out. You mentioned Luke Gifford. He's been on this roster for forever. What's his role this season?
I think it's a step up from where he was. Not much of a step up, but a little bit probably more balance between special teams and some defensive snaps. Yep. He's going to be your fourth linebacker up until one of these other younger players kind of steps up and takes that spot for him. But I think he's a guy that's serviceable. He's not going to get you killed if he's out there for a couple snaps. You're definitely going to not want him out there as a long-term starter. If there's a,
he should be your last linebacker on the depth chart, really. I mean, last active linebacker. Sorry, that's the way I should word it.
You don't want. If there was a situation where your depth was hurt so bad that he's a starter, then you may want to consider go out and get somebody, temporarily until, like I said, one of these younger guys.
But he can get you through a game, and
absolutely.
I don't think he's going to kill you there. So
no, and I think he can play a role if he needs to.
Next one, we should mention Damone Clark, who not likely to play this season. Mike McCarthy maybe a little bit more optimistic. Somebody we talked about pre-draft, we graded him as a late second, early third round player. The Cowboys get him in the 5th round. Again, probably not going to play next year, but the expectation is by 2023, he's probably going to take Jabril Cox's job with the hope that Jabril Cox becomes Leighton Vander Esch, correct?
Yeah, I think the idea is that a year from now it'll be an LSU backfield with Parsons kind of being the wild card, a linebacker field.
Yep, I think that's pretty good. All right, next one that we need to talk about, Devin Harper. He's going to play a lot of special teams if he makes the roster, but I just don't see him factoring into the linebacker conversation this year or next year. He's a long ways away.
Yeah, I mean, he's just uber athleticism, in a kind of a linebacker body. So I agree. I don't know that he's someone that I'm penciling in for a bunch of linebacker snaps, more special teams.
It reminds me a lot of CJ Goodwin, where technically, yes, he's on the roster as a linebacker, where CJ Goodwin's on the roster as a cornerback, but we don't factor either of those players into the depth chart at their respective positions.
I mean, if he could be, as good a defensive player as CJ Goodwin is, while being as good a special teams player as CJ Goodwin is, I'll take it for sure.
Yeah. All right. Last linebacker that I want to mention, Aaron Hansford, who we did talk a little bit about. He's an undrafted free agent that the Cowboys gave quite a bit of money to. I know a lot of people liked him more than Devin Harper. Some people even had him in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Do you think he has a realistic shot to beat out Harper or Luke Gifford for a roster spot this year?
I don't know. It's interesting because I do think that he is sort of an interesting guy in this group because he doesn't quite fit the body style of the other ones. He's a little bit more of a bigger guy, and that makes him a little bit more unique. I feel like. I think if anything, Gifford is kind of the prototype of where his track is. But I mean, I think it's going to be difficult for him because of the pedigree of the folks ahead of him. I'm thinking that this is a guy that they stash on the practice squad. Right. They bring him back next year, and then maybe next year is your Luke Gifford.
Yeah, I agree. One last question that I wanted to ask you before we head out. Do you think the Cowboys need to consider adding one more veteran to this linebacker core? Because I'm of the belief where if you added one more guy and just it doesn't even have to be a great name, but somebody else into this group, I would feel so much better about where they're at. What are your thoughts?
I certainly am not opposed to it, but I think it needs to be after training camp or near the end of training camp, because I think that you've got so many names right now. It's so many people that you've got to see what you've got in them first. And linebacker, again, is one of those positions that, they go through a brutal training camp. They get used a lot. So, I think at this point, you see what you got in these young players. Linebacker is always going to be a position that you should be able to fill at a certain level at any point in the season, right? Like, unless you're going out to get a top end guy, which I don't even know what the free agent market looks like for those guys. But
I've got some names. You
let's
just
hear 'em.
quick yes or no. The big one, Anthony Barr.
I mean, that's a different thing, right?
That's a
like
different
because
linebacker, right? That's not
because
really what we're talking about.
Yeah, because Barr would be kind of part of the pass rush, I think, plan too. I mean,
Yeah.
he gives you more than just a linebacker. So let's put him aside a little bit. I am interested there, but I think his role would be more than just off-ball linebacker.
Jamie Collins.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but we'd have to know the price. And like I said, I think that's another guy that I don't need Jamie Collins in training camp with me. So let's see what happens. Let's see where he is after, or at least a couple weeks in training camp.
A few more. You can just say yes or no. Dante Hightower.
Yes, depending on the price.
See, he's the one where, hey, if you told me we're signing Dante Hightower to help kind of mentor Micah Parsons a little bit and mentor Jabril Cox, and he's going to play 25 snaps a game, mostly on first down and second down, and as a pass rusher, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Anthony Barr situation, except I think Hightower could be more of a mentor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anthony Hitchens. I think he's kind of done.
Yeah. I don't think so.
KJ Wright. I actually still like KJ Wright. I thought he played well for the Raiders last year.
I still can't get over that he hasn't been signed yet. I guess this is what happened last year too. So
yeah, he waited until I think right before week 1.
Yeah, I think KJ Wright makes a ton of sense, honestly, and maybe the best fit, like just as far as names go.
Quan Alexander.
He's had injury issues, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's had a lot.
Yeah,
he's only 28. Joe Schobert.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good fit simply because he's that, like the money I bet would be right. He's got experience. You're not looking for someone. I don't feel like you need to add someone like it's just going to be a gangbuster. I think Joe Schobert. No,
you just need somebody at like a 2.5. Yeah, you need somebody at like 1 year, $2.5 million that can play. Depending on the week, can play 21 snaps or can play 46, just depending on how things go.
Yeah, and that's why I think a level of guy like Joe Schobert makes sense.
Yeah, I would love to see KJ Wright, because I think KJ Wright's somebody who can, if you need 3 linebackers on the field, he can play your Sam, he can play your weak side. He's still really good in the run game. And obviously he's got a little bit of a connection with Dan Quinn. So that's personally the guy that I would like to see. We'll see if the Cowboys are interested here. Much like the wide receiver market and the wide receiver position and defensive tackle, I don't think the Cowboys are in a rush here, because if you need KJ Wright, he's still going to be available a month from now, 6 weeks from now. And if Devin Harper and Jabril Cox are struggling and Luke Gifford's not playing well, that's when you go out and get him. I just don't think you'd have to do that one right now.
Absolutely. That's how I feel too. Just you wait and see what you got, and then the contingency plan is the guys on the street. And like you said, you mentioned 5 of them. I have a hard time believing all 5 are gone before the training camp's finished.
And there's more guys out there like that. Yeah. So yeah, they'll all get picked up eventually, just not now, and not in the next 2 weeks either. So, all right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen today. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. Landon, you and I are going to be off for the rest of the week. We'll jump back here on probably Tuesday. We'll probably take Monday off. Yeah, we'll take Monday off.
Enjoy your holiday, folks. Everybody, 4th of July. Make sure you have fun.
So we'll be back on Tuesday answering your questions. talking about the secondary the rest of the week. Make sure you're downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. Enjoy your holiday weekend. We'll see you guys next time.